Hey, good morning, all my motorcycling biker fanatic friends and others, my political followers. I don't think we'd have a problem with politics if more people ride bikes. I must be honest with you. You know what I'm saying? But unfortunately, you don't. I don't know why not. I don't know why you don't ride a motorcycle. Let me tell you, and this is where I'm going to start. In the 70s and 80s, when I grew up and went into adolescence, where I lived in a place called Sunny Ridge, in just above Primrose, which is now, I believe, almost a no-go zone. But when I lived there, it was quite a lacquer community, and everybody that was anybody in my community had something to do with motorcycles. Down the road, I had Robbie Peterson and Russell Wood. I don't know if they lived together there or whatever the case may be, but they had a house there, and one of them lived there. And Dave Peterson stayed down the road in Edenvale. And whenever the new bikes would come out that they were going to race in the season, those guys would be the first to get the prototypes, the new models. So that's where I first saw the VF500 F2, I think it was. I first saw the NS400 two-stroke, three-cylinder. I first saw the RZ500 Yamaha GP replica, and others, VF400s, CB1100 RCs, getting prepped for racing at Kyalami. And at that point, I was already an adolescent, and I'd already bought, my grandfather had bought me a 50cc Honda MBX. Now, what drove this passion? What drove this passion? And I want to tell you, watching guys come, craziest thing, even our domestic lady was killed by a guy on an RD350 right in front of our gate. No fault of his. Fortunately, she'd become intoxicated and stepped out of the gate in an intoxicated state as the guy was coming into what we call Death Bend. I stayed at the top of Orient Road, and there was a Death Bend going into Northridge Road, and the guys used to come in there. And he was on the pipe a little bit. He must have been gearing down already for that corner, and boom. So motorcycles have played a massive role in my life. I was there. We used to go down to the Hyperama in Edenvale every Sunday, and we used to race our 50s and the faster guys on there, RD125s and RZ125s and RZ3 and RD350s, racing around, with a makeshift track there at Hyperama Edenvale. And, I had my first serious motorbike accident there. I also watched a guy pass away there. And, this was our youth. This was our life. But let me tell you something. And I have fond memories of it. Bikes, motorbikes. Motorbikes really changed my life. Motorbikes, to a large extent, have made me who I am. The people in the motorcycle community are who influenced me to become better. When I was spaced out and whacked out on drugs, it was members of the motorcycle community, dirt bikers, that came together and put me into rehab the last time. And, and I'll always be eternally grateful for that, because it was that intervention that led me to where I am today. Bikes, bikers, dirt bikers, whoever you are, and in my mind, what formulated this passion for motorbikes was a magazine called Bike SA. Bike SA. When my grandfather used to go to the cafe, the corner cafe up at House Circle, and I was a young boy, man. I would scour those magazine racks for that Bike SA to see, you know, I just had this absolute, I would almost say from birth, passion for these things. And then I found this magazine, Bike SA, and, you know, little did I know that the guy who edited, published, built that magazine was a man by the name of Simon Fourie. And I just want to say that, you know, Simon Fourie and his magazine played such a massive role in my life in terms of what I became as a motorcyclist, you know. I remember looking at the pictures of these new bikes that were coming out. You know, back then, the CB 900s and the CB 750s, and then later on the GPZ 900 Ninjas and the GPZ 750 Turbo and the RZ 500s and CBR 900 Fireblades, and before that even the CB 1100 RCs and RBs, and who can forget the articles that he wrote on the Kawasaki GPZ 1100 Eddie Lawson replicas. But let me tell you something, it was just, you know, and then, you know, towards the back of the magazine we had, or middle to back of the magazine, we always had that 2-page editorial, if I can call it that, by Charlie Cooper, you know, and I lived for that stuff. I lived to read this, and you know, and then once you get to the back of the magazine, of course, the smalls, you know, the smalls were, I probably spent more time in the smalls than I did in the rest of the magazine. And you know, it always fascinated me about this magazine is that they covered everything. They covered everything. They covered the racing at Kyalami, then they covered the racing at Kalani, then they covered the racing at Swartkorps. And then it was that time we had the Camel Series motocross at Corabrik and Syringa Spa and all these places, you know. And I was fortunate, I stayed very close to Corabrik, so we used to get on our BMXs, go down to flipping Corabrik and watch the oaks there flipping. Before Corabrik even was Brickall. And watch the oaks on the XR200s and XR500s and RT495s and KTM 490s doing their thing around there, you know. And often when they had the racing there, you go there, and of course you'd have Bike SA would be there. And, you know, you'd want to try to get in a photograph, you know, as a kid. And, you know, doing Bike SA. So, you know, I just want to say that, you know, Simon Fourie and all the other journalists, but primarily Simon Fourie, you changed a young boy's life, but I'm telling you, you changed my life. You fueled this passion. It's not even a passion, it became an obsession, you know. As a Christian, I often have to go and stand before God and say, you know what, Lord, I hope I'm not being in idolatry here, that I'm idolizing these machines over you. But I can tell you, without my bikes and what they mean to me and the people that I meet wherever I go on these bikes, whether it be on the passes of Lesotho on my dirt bike, or adventure rides at the KTM Adventures and other adventures, the Lowveld dual sport adventures run by Rika, and whether we just, a couple of us, hop on our bikes and cruise down to the coast, or whatever it is, wherever we find a Swaziland cucking off there in the mountains, or Heidelberg cucking off there. Motorbikes and the people I've met on motorbikes have made me who I am today. And one of the greatest influences of that was Simon Fourie. And I really feel like I've lost a brother. I really do. And you know, I think I met the man in total 3 times in my life. 3 times. But I felt like from reading his stuff and seeing what he gave us as the motorcycling community, made me feel like I knew him, like he came to browse at my house. I mean, And Don, I want to say that you're doing a sterling job, bro, in fulfilling the legacy that your dad started. And also, I just want to say a shout out to the other journos in South Africa. Guys like Glenn Foley and Clinton Pino even, and everyone that, that is involved with, just bringing the message of motorcycling out there in a positive way. I also want to put a shout out to the bike clubs that are always doing these charity drives and all of that type of stuff. Guys, keep on keeping on, and to the memory of Simon Fourie, brother, you'll never be forgotten in this country. I'm telling you now. Well, not as long as people my age and fractionally younger than me are alive. I could tell you that. Who can forget? And I'll close on the tribute to Simon Fourie. Who can forget that Simon Fourie still holds the record? And I think it was on an old GS1000 that he did it. You can correct me. You're welcome to correct me. I'm not sure, but I think it was on a GS1000. I think he still holds the record from Joburg to Durban. Never been beaten. And I think that record was like 3 hours and 1 minute, or 2 hours and 59 seconds. But 3 hours, Joburg to Durban. And I believe it started center of town Joburg to center of town Durban. But you guys can correct me on that. But the record stands 3 hours. And I'll leave it there. So God bless you, Simon. And thank you for what you meant in my life. But rest in peace, brother. We appreciate you. Then on to more the only word I can find is comedic relief. Comedic relief. So, the whole of South Africa, from what I can see on social media, is up in arms about Simon Luli, who is apparently the general fighter, king, revolutionary of the military wing of the EFF. And people are up in arms. But now, I'll be honest with you guys. I got that video probably about 2-3 hours before it broke on mainstream media. Somebody must have pulled it off his TikTok account and sent it to me. And maybe it was already trending on some social media platforms, but a friend of mine sent it to me. Chun, what do you think of this? And I sent back a message. I said, but really, I'm not even going to concern myself with an imbecile like this. You know what I mean? Really. And this is the way I want you people to try and view it. Yeah, the guy saying all kinds of flippin', horrific and stupid things. You know what I mean? It's like me coming up here now and making, me. I'm the general of the whatever flip and military wing of whatever organization I choose, and put that t-shirt on it, and all black people must leave the country in 15 minutes. But you know what I mean? You're going to look at me and you're going to tune me, listen, Dave, just stop it. You know what I mean? You're acting like a flippin' knob. And that's really what it is. It's just I honestly believe, and I wrote this as a comment on one of the times that thing has been reposted, which is probably about 1 million times, I think, already. I wrote there, I said, for me, it's clear that this video was made in a psychiatric institution, perhaps Sterkfontein Mental Health Hospital, and this guy managed to get his hands on a t-shirt and a flippin' toy gun and a cell phone, and, made this flippin' video. And everybody, bro, that guy is clearly mentally unstable. Clearly. He is, I've had a couple of these guys on my program like that. A couple that are in psychosis from drug abuse. And they all believe these things about themselves, and they all believe these things about what is going on, which are so far removed from reality that, if you want, I actually blocked one of the guys who were previously on my program that also started a Facebook profile, and if I must go unblock him now and pull down that guy's Facebook profile and put what he has to say up on here, you guys would understand exactly what I'm talking about. Don't take people like this seriously. Seriously, don't take people like this seriously. I mean, and let's say for argument's sake, right, this guy is a paid-up member of the EFF, and you know, this is actually real, right? You can rest in the knowledge. Can I put it that way? Imagine, I'm going with this. Imagine you run a political party, right? And that type of individual is the type of individual that your party is attracting. Imagine. What does that say for you as a leader? And what does that say for your political party if that is the level of follower that your party and your rhetoric is attracting? I mean, I would look at that in absolute horror and disgust. I would resign. I would close my party down. I promise you. If I looked at that and I considered myself a leader of any shape or form, and I said, right, well, I'm a leader, I lead this party, and this guy comes on there, and I look at that and I go, well, that's what I'm leading. Those are the types of people I'm leading. That is the type of leadership that my leadership attracts, the type of person, that my leadership attracts. I would be so grossly embarrassed that I literally would close my party down and disappear. Because it speaks to the level of intelligence and the level of intellect that is required to follow a retarded rhetoric that is being spouted by a person who, Julius Malema, is well aware of what type of demographic he is attempting to incite. Because at the end of the day, whether it's this type of individual or someone of more, look, honestly, I don't know how anybody with any kind of intelligence on any level could follow that guy. I'll be honest with you. If you find yourself following that brand of politics in this day and age, you honestly have to go and sit down and ask the question, am I retarded? Am I retarded? Because it's you must be. It's impossible as a person of any kind of intelligence and intellect to stand and watch and listen to what this guy has to say and say, you know, this is why I got this Carl Niehaus is a joke to me. An absolute and utter, complete, failed joke of a human being. You know what I'm saying? You cannot come onto any kind of public forum and claim to follow that, and then in the same breath claim that you have some kind of intellect or intelligence. They are mutually exclusive. You cannot bring those two things into, what's the word I'm looking for? I keep losing words, you know what I mean? But you can't bring them together. It doesn't work. In order for that rhetoric to work, all right, you need low volume IQ, room temperature IQ. It's as simple as that. And if you find yourself following that, I'm telling you that you have room temperature IQ. And if you're in any way concerned about what this flippin' clown had to say, you also have a low volume IQ. Don't even worry about it. It's retarded. It's ridiculous. You know what I mean? And you know, I'll put a challenge out to that guy. I'm just a normal South African with very limited military skill and ability. And I'd like to say to you that I'll put a challenge out to you. Me personally, Mr. Military Wing, I'll put a challenge out to you just to show you how flippin' retarded you are, okay? Let's arrange a demarcated area, perhaps in the Kruger National Park, or if you'd like to prefer urban combat, let's do it in a city, all right? And you arm yourself and I'll arm myself, and then they drop us in this demarcated area. And we've got, let's say, 48 hours to locate one another and find out who's actually what. Me and you. How's that sound? You, as the military leader, the leader of the military wing of the EFF, and me, as Dave, the leader of Zero, and not a soldier, and nothing spectacular, just me, Dave the South African. In other words, and I'll put a stake on it. I'll put a stake on it. How about this? All right. If I win, the entire EFF leaves the country. How about that? All right. And if you win, then the entire, I'll try and get the entire white establishment to leave the country, but it's ridiculous. But anyway, but let's put stakes on it. What? This Madala versus you in an urban or bush combat environment, one-on-one. And let's check how it goes. And that'll be the stake. You win, your entire party leaves. Sorry, you win, we all leave. I win, and you all leave. How's that for a deal? You flippin' clown. He's a clown, bro. He's a clown. He's an absolute clown. All right, so I said that in jest, just by the way. I don't really mean it. But, it's ridiculous. And I said it because it's ridiculous. All right. Guys, always remember, we as lions don't concern ourselves with the opinions of sheep. And something that a very well-known gangster taught me one day, bro, because I was going through some pressures in life, and I cried out to him because we're mates, and I said to him, listen, bro, I don't know what to do anymore. And he said, David, always remember this, my brother. And this guy was in the newspapers. They were dealing with some cuck at one point in their lives, and he picked up a lot of flack. And he said this to me, Dave, always remember this, my brother. The tallest trees always catch the most wind. And then I brought that to someone else, and I said, so-and-so said this, and he said, yeah, that's true, it's exactly that. But also remember, Dave, the tallest trees do catch the most wind, but it's very crowded at the bottom. I'll close with that. God bless you, Simon. Condolences to Donovan and the motorcycle community from a true biker, motorcyclist, whatever you want to call me. God bless you guys. And the weekend of riding starts. MotoGP is on. We're riding bikes. We're going to Satellite Road where it's happening. Lekker. Sweet, guys. God bless. Cheers.